It's strange how a house can hold its breath. Mine did that night, silent, heavy, expectant. The air smelled of dark chocolate and cherries, the scent curling through the hall like a memory I didn't want to keep. I had baked the cake myself. My grandmother's recipe: glossy frosting, tart fruit, 73 candles lined in 3 perfect rows. I had set the table with her embroidered cloth, the one she stitched by hand when she was my age. The ivory thread still gleamed in the candlelight, like it refused to fade, even when everything else in my life had started to. I stood back and looked at it all: the delicate plates, the crystal glasses, the pearl-colored candles. Everything was ready for 2, but only 1 chair would be filled. The phone vibrated on the counter. My son's name lit the screen: David Hale. For a second, my heart lifted like it always did when he called. "Hey, Mom," his voice came through, half distracted. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, smiling at the sound. "The cake's done. Come by around 7, all right? I made your favorite chocolate cherry. You remember how much you loved it as a boy?" There was a pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background, a woman's laughter, high and crisp. "Mom," David said, hesitating. "Actually, Laura made reservations at the garden room. It's kind of last minute, you know how hard it is to get in there." I pictured the place immediately. Sleek glass walls, linen napkins folded like origami, people posting pictures of their cocktails before even taking a sip. "Oh," I said softly, trying to sound light. "That sounds lovely. Maybe you could come afterward for dessert?" He exhaled, like even that was an effort. "We'll see how late it is. Just save us a slice, okay? Save us a slice." That was it. Not, "Happy birthday, Mom." Not, "We'll be there soon." Just 3 words that felt colder than the night air seeping through the window. After he hung up, I looked around the kitchen. Everything was so carefully placed, so achingly ready. The emerald tablecloth, the porcelain plates, the napkins folded in swans, all waiting for a celebration that wouldn't come. The clock ticked past 7, then 8, then 9. I tried not to cry, so I busied myself slicing the cake, setting aside a neat little portion like he'd asked. I even wrapped it in foil, just as if he might appear at the door, grinning like a boy, saying, "I made it, Mom." But no one came. When the clock struck 10, I gave up pretending. I lit all 73 candles anyway. The room glowed warm and golden. The flicker made the shadows dance across the photographs on the wall. David in his graduation gown, my late husband smiling in his Sunday suit, me in my sewing apron, hair pinned back, younger and hopeful. I whispered the song under my breath, my voice thin and trembling. "Happy birthday to you." When I blew out the candles, I made no wish. Because wishes are for people who still believe someone's coming. I sat in the stillness for a long while, until the only sound left was the hum of the refrigerator and the faint beating of my own heart. Then, my phone buzzed again. A message from David. "Mom, save us some cake. Laura wants to try it tomorrow." No emoji, no heart, just that. I stared at the screen, the words burning brighter than the candles ever did. That's when it hit me, not the loneliness, but the insult of being an afterthought, of being the refrigerator of their lives, something that keeps what they want until they're ready to consume it. I laughed softly, then I cried. Then I stopped doing both, because neither made sense anymore. I sat down at the kitchen table, the cake between us, me, and the ghost of the family I once had. "Save you a slice?" I whispered. "I've saved all of me for you, David, every piece, and you didn't want any of it." That was the moment everything began to shift. The quiet wasn't sadness anymore. It was clarity, cold, steady, and final. Let me tell you how I stopped saving slices for people who only wanted leftovers. I'm glad you're here. Give this story a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far truth can travel, because the one I'm about to tell you tore through my family like a wildfire that refused to die. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was sliding across the kitchen floor, tracing gold over the crumbs from last night's untouched cake. The air still smelled like cherries and sugar, sweet and heavy, a cruel reminder that love, when wasted, turns to rot. I poured myself coffee and sat at the table. The chair across from me felt like an accusation. The folded napkin, untouched, almost sneered. It was as if the house itself was asking, "How long are you going to pretend this is enough?" I looked down at my hands, wrinkled, spotted, trembling slightly. I used to think they were strong hands. They had fed a child, mended torn sleeves, pressed fevered foreheads, and built a life from scraps. But that morning, they felt like they belonged to someone who'd been emptied out. I stared at the old family photo on the wall. David, at 7, chocolate on his cheeks, gap-toothed grin. That was the last birthday his father ever attended. The memory of that day flickered like an old film. Balloons tied to the mailbox. My husband Richard laughing as he lifted David high onto his shoulders, me pretending not to cry as I snapped a picture. He died 3 months later. Heart attack. Sudden. Merciless. I remember sitting in the hospital corridor, gripping his wedding band in my palm, wondering how I would ever raise a child alone. But I did. God, I did. I went back to work 2 weeks later, hemming pants, fixing zippers, taking in suits. The sound of the sewing machine became the soundtrack of my life, a steady, mechanical heartbeat that kept me alive. Every dollar I earned went to David. His school lunches, his piano lessons, his prom tuxedo. I sold my mother's brooch to pay for his first semester of college, and I told myself it was worth it. Every sacrifice was an investment in his happiness. When he graduated, I clapped until my hands ached. I thought I was finally allowed to rest. Then he met Laura. She was the kind of woman who made rooms smaller, just by standing in them, tall, elegant, perfectly polished, with eyes that smiled while her mouth didn't. At first, I adored her. I bought her flowers, complimented her dresses, even gave her my late husband's cufflinks for their engagement. I wanted her to feel like family. But some people see kindness as currency. And once you pay, they just keep taking. The first red flag was subtle, Laura insisting on paying the restaurant bill at their rehearsal dinner, only for me to find out later that David had quietly slipped my credit card to the waiter. Then came the short-term loans. A few thousand here, 5,000 there. Always for something urgent, always with a promise to pay me back next month. Next month never came. By the time they got married, I'd given them $12,000 for the wedding, another $15,000 for a car down payment, and $8,000 for condo renovations. Every time, I told myself I was just being a good mother. Every time, I believed David when he said, "It's just until we get settled." But the truth? They weren't getting settled. They were getting comfortable. And last night, the birthday, the text that was the breaking point. That was when I realized love shouldn't require proof of credit. I stood up, poured the rest of the coffee down the drain, and walked to Richard's old study. It hadn't changed in decades. The scent of his cologne still lingered faint, woody, like the ghost of better years. I opened the drawer where we kept important papers. My fingers brushed against the property deed, the bank statements, the will. I froze. Richard had left everything to me, sole owner, no co-signers, no shared title. But David didn't know that. 6 months earlier, I had overheard him telling Laura, "Don't worry, once Mom's gone, the house is ours. She already told me she'd put my name on it." I never told him otherwise. Maybe part of me wanted to believe he cared enough not to think that way, but he did. And now, reading that deed, I realized the only person who had ever truly respected my sacrifices was the one who died decades ago. The rest of them? They only respected what they could inherit. I pulled open another drawer, my old blue ledger, its cover worn thin. Inside, my handwriting filled every page. Every dollar I'd ever given him. Every empty promise I'd believed. March 15, $15,000 for Laura's car. July, $12,000 for condo repairs. October to March, $6,000 monthly for living expenses. Total, $141,000. I stared at the number until my eyes blurred. It wasn't the money that hurt, it was what it represented. All those years of labor turned into transactions. Every sacrifice reduced to a wire transfer. That's when something inside me shifted. A stillness first, then a decision. I wasn't going to beg to be loved anymore. I wasn't going to wait for crumbs from my own table. I grabbed a sheet of stationery from the drawer and began to write. My hand trembled, but my words didn't. "Enjoy your slice of cake, David. I'm going to enjoy my self-respect." I folded the note, placed it neatly under the cake, and blew out one last candle. Then, for the first time in 73 years, I packed a suitcase, not for anyone else, but for myself. When dawn broke, the car engine hummed like freedom. And as I drove away, the house, my house, disappeared in the rearview mirror, growing smaller until it looked like what it had become long ago. A memory. The highway stretched endlessly ahead of me, a gray ribbon cutting through dawn's pale light. The radio played low, an old song I used to hum while sewing at midnight. I didn't sing this time. I just drove. Each mile I left behind felt like a stitch being unpicked from a garment that no longer fit. I didn't have a plan, only a destination. Evelyn, my cousin, lived 3 hours away in a quiet town that still believed in front porches and Sunday pie. She had buried her husband a few years before I lost mine, and unlike me, she had learned how to rebuild her life. Her voice on the phone last night had been steady and unshocked, as if she'd been waiting years for me to say the words, "I'm leaving." When I arrived, Evelyn was already standing on her porch, apron still on, flour dusting her hands. She hugged me without asking questions, the way family should when you have no strength left to explain. Inside her kitchen, the smell of cinnamon rolls filled the air. I sat at her wooden table and told her everything: the forgotten birthday, the text message, the years of giving and never being seen. She listened quietly, eyes sharp but kind. When I finished, she folded her hands and said something that cut straight through me. "Margaret, you haven't been a mother in a long time. You've been a provider. There's a difference." The words stung because they were true. Evelyn poured me tea, her bracelets jingling softly. "You didn't leave too late," she said. "You left the moment you realized you were disappearing." I nodded, unable to speak. Later that morning, while she tended her garden, I sat on the porch and went through the blue folder I'd brought. Bank statements, copies of wire transfers, loan notes, a paper trail of love misunderstood. That's when I saw something I'd almost forgotten. A letter from my financial advisor, dated 8 months ago, recommending I update my will. I hadn't done it. Until now, I hadn't seen a reason to. But as I stared at those documents, I realized something chilling. If I had died yesterday, David and Laura would have inherited everything without lifting a finger. The house, the savings, my life's work, all of it. That thought made me nauseous. When Evelyn returned with a basket of tomatoes, I looked up. "Do you still have that friend who used to practice law?" She smiled, knowing exactly what I meant. "You mean Henry Coleman? He retired 2 years ago. But for family, he still keeps his pen." By afternoon, we were sitting in Henry's office, a small building behind his home, its shelves lined with thick binders and dusty law books. He was a man in his late 60s, with kind eyes and a measured voice that reminded me of my husband. "Mrs. Hale," he said after listening to everything, "what your son and his wife have done may not be criminal, but it borders on financial abuse. You're well within your rights to restructure your estate. We can protect what's yours quietly, legally, and permanently." His tone was calm, but the words felt like thunder. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of control. He slid a form toward me. "A living trust," he explained. "You'll move all assets under your name alone. No one can touch them without your consent. When you're gone, your instructions dictate what happens, not assumptions." I hesitated, fingers resting on the pen. "Is this fair?" Henry's gaze didn't waver. "Fairness is not the question, Mrs. Hale. You're correcting a mistake." So I signed. Each stroke of the pen felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, one signature for every apology I'd ever made, every favor I'd granted, every time I'd said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. When I was done, Henry sealed the documents and looked at me. "Now," he said softly, "you're free." I walked out into the sunlight, the weight in my chest lighter but strange, like I'd just stepped into a life I didn't know I was allowed to have. That night, Evelyn made roast chicken and poured me a glass of wine. We sat on the porch, the air thick with crickets and the smell of wet earth after rain. "What will you do now?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm done waiting for their apologies." Evelyn leaned back, smiling faintly. "Good, because sometimes the only justice worth waiting for is the one you create yourself." Her words lingered long after we went inside. I thought of David then, of him laughing in that restaurant while I sat by my cake, of the years he said later and how later had become never. Somewhere between guilt and resolve, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't just disappear. I would make them see me in the one place they couldn't ignore. A courtroom. 2 days later, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet, except for the low hum of Evelyn's old refrigerator and the birds starting to sing outside. I poured a cup of black coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my phone. Dozens of missed calls, 12 unread texts, all from David. "Mom, please answer. Where are you? I'm worried. Laura says you're being dramatic. Just come home, okay? We'll talk." The first few sounded concerned. By the last ones, the tone had turned sharp, defensive, almost angry, as if my disappearance were a personal inconvenience to him. I didn't reply. I wasn't ready to be found. I scrolled further down and saw something else, a new photo Laura had posted the night I left. Her in a red dress, champagne glass lifted. The caption, "Celebrating life's little victories." Little victories. That was me. I realized one of her victories. She had won my son, my savings, and my silence. Not anymore. When Evelyn woke up, she found me at the table surrounded by papers. "Are you doing your taxes or plotting a revolution?" She teased gently. "Maybe both," I said, smiling faintly. She poured coffee for herself. Henry called. "He's drafting the trust papers, but he also said something else. You might want to update your will formally. Leave no cracks." I nodded. "I'll meet him today." By mid-morning, we were back in Henry Coleman's modest office. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting long stripes over the mahogany desk. He greeted me with a calm nod. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale. Ready to make history?" I laughed softly. "Just ready to stop repeating it." We spent 2 hours going over every line. The living trust was airtight. No one, not David, not Laura, could alter a single clause without my signature. My home, my savings, my pension, all protected. I even created a small charitable fund for widows who had endured financial abuse, something Henry said he'd help me register later. When we were done, I leaned back, exhausted but relieved. Henry smiled. "You've built something indestructible." I exhaled slowly. "Then why do I still feel hollow?" "Because," he said, "freedom feels lonely at first." I nodded. He was right. For the first time in my life, I wasn't tethered to anyone else's needs. It felt powerful and terrifying. That evening, Evelyn cooked spaghetti, the way she always did when she wanted to cheer someone up. We ate in comfortable silence until her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, frowned, then handed it to me. "It's your son." I took the phone reluctantly. His text was short. "Mom, Laura's been talking to a lawyer. She says you're not in your right mind. Please come back before this gets ugly." The words made my stomach twist. "Evelyn," I whispered. "What does he mean?" She sighed. "It sounds like Laura's planning to contest your independence, maybe claim you're incompetent to manage your finances. It's a dirty tactic, but not uncommon." I stared at the message again, my heart pounding. She'd really do that? "She already has," Evelyn said quietly. "Henry just texted me too. They filed for an elder competency review." I set the phone down. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. Then she picked the wrong old woman to underestimate. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and signatures. Henry gathered documentation, medical records, proving my health, financial statements, showing years of organized management, even witness letters from former clients of my sewing business. Evelyn helped me gather everything. Each document was like a weapon, each signature a shield. But late one night, as I sat by the window listening to the cicadas, doubt crept in. Would the court believe me a 73-year-old widow over a polished young couple with expensive lawyers and fake charm? I thought of Laura's calculating smile, the way she had called me sweetheart in public and clingy behind my back. No, I couldn't let her win. I opened my journal and wrote, "They took my silence as weakness. Tomorrow, they'll learn it was preparation." When the court date arrived, the morning felt surreal. The courthouse loomed gray and cold, its marble steps slick with rain. Evelyn squeezed my hand as we climbed. Henry walked beside us, briefcase in hand, calm as ever. "Just tell the truth," he said, "and let the evidence do the rest." Inside, Laura was already there, flawless as ever, in a cream suit and pearls, her expression the perfect blend of concern and superiority. David sat beside her, pale and nervous, eyes darting toward me before dropping to the floor. When she saw me, Laura offered a tight smile. "Mrs. Hale, you look well," she said, as though complimenting a corpse. I met her gaze evenly. "You look expensive." Evelyn smothered a laugh. The judge entered. Everyone stood. As the proceedings began, Laura's lawyer spoke first, smooth, professional, dripping with false sympathy. "My client is deeply concerned for her mother-in-law's well-being," he began. "Mrs. Hale has exhibited erratic behavior, abandoning her home, cutting off communication, and moving large sums of money without notice. We believe she may be under undue influence." I wanted to laugh. Undue influence? The only influence I'd been under was self-respect. When it was Henry's turn, he stood and adjusted his glasses. His voice was calm, confident, surgical. "Your Honor," he said, "what Mrs. Hale has exhibited is not erratic behavior. It's independence. The evidence will show she has managed her finances meticulously for decades, supported her son generously, and acted rationally to protect herself from continued exploitation." He laid out the evidence piece by piece, the ledger of every loan, the receipts for their vacations, even screenshots of Laura's texts to friends mocking me as the Old ATM. The courtroom murmured. The judge's eyes narrowed. Laura's composure cracked for the first time. David looked as if he might be sick. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. My knees trembled, but my voice did not. "I'm not here because I'm confused," I said. "I'm here because I've spent 40 years being too understanding. I raised a son, buried a husband, and paid for a life that was never mine to enjoy. All I've done now is stop paying." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the judge seemed to hold his breath. "Mrs. Hale," he finally said, "that may be the clearest testimony I've ever heard." When the gavel came down, it sounded like thunder. The petition was denied. Laura's face froze. David buried his face in his hands. And I walked out into the rain, my head held high, the storm washing away decades of submission. The rain outside had slowed to a mist by the time we reached the courthouse steps. The gray sky felt cleaner somehow, as if it had been waiting for this verdict too. Evelyn handed me her umbrella, but I didn't open it. I wanted to feel the rain on my skin, cold, stinging, alive. Behind me, I heard the heavy doors open. "Mom," David's voice called out, unsteady, desperate. I turned. He was standing halfway down the steps, soaked, his tie loosened, his face pale. Laura lingered behind him, speaking in hushed, furious tones to her lawyer. "Don't," Evelyn whispered at my side. "He needs to walk those last few steps on his own." And he did. David descended, each step slower than the last. "Mom," he said again, "I didn't know she was going to do that. I swear to you, I didn't." I watched him, the boy who once brought me dandelions from the yard, who'd sobbed into my skirt when his father died, now standing there like a stranger caught in the wreckage of his own choices. "You didn't want to know," I said quietly. "That's different." He flinched, looking down. "You're right." He rubbed his face, the rain mixing with tears. "I've been awful. I let her." His voice broke. "I let her turn me into someone I don't even recognize." For a long moment, I said nothing. I was tired, too tired for hatred, too old for revenge, but not too broken for truth. "You had a choice," I said, "and so did I." He nodded slowly, as if absorbing a language he hadn't heard in years. "Can I fix this?" he asked. "Please, tell me what to do." I thought of all the nights I'd waited for that question. The countless times I'd bailed him out, soothed his mistakes, erased his debts. Not this time. "Fix yourself first," I said. "The rest will follow." Evelyn touched my elbow gently. "Come on, Margaret." I turned to go. David took one step forward. "Mom, wait." I stopped, but didn't turn around. "You can come by when you learn how to knock," I said softly. Then I walked away. That night, Evelyn and I sat by her fireplace, the orange glow dancing across the walls. The verdict had ended one battle, but peace didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Laura's smirk fading when the judge denied her petition, the look of someone realizing control was slipping through her fingers. "She won't give up easily," Evelyn said. "People like her never do." I nodded. "Let her try. I'm done living afraid." I thought about Henry's words earlier that day. Freedom feels lonely at first. He was right, but loneliness wasn't the same as emptiness. This was quiet, earned quiet. Before bed, I checked my email. A message from Henry awaited. Subject: Next steps. Mrs. Hale, I've filed the property transfer. Your house is now fully secured under your trust. No external party can make a claim without your signature. I also suggest updating your will to include the new charitable fund we discussed. Congratulations, you've just insured. Your legacy belongs only to you. Regards, Henry Coleman. I smiled, a small, quiet smile. It wasn't about money anymore, it was about dignity. The next morning, Evelyn and I drove back to my old neighborhood. It was time to face what I'd left behind. The street looked smaller than I remembered. The trees overgrown, the houses faded. My home sat at the corner, shutters closed, the garden untended. It felt more like a museum than a memory. When I stepped inside, the scent hit me first: stale air, dust, and faint sweetness from the cake that had long since spoiled. The table was still set, the green embroidered cloth, the plates, the candles. Mold had bloomed over the frosting like frost. Evelyn wrinkled her nose. Good grief. Leave it, I said quietly. It's a reminder. We opened the curtains, and light flooded the room, harsh but cleansing. Dust motes swirled like tiny ghosts. I walked through each room slowly. The study, where I'd written the note. The sewing corner, where I'd once spent whole nights stitching dresses for other people's happiness. The kitchen, where I'd stood waiting for a doorbell that never rang. Evelyn leaned against the doorway. What are you thinking? That I'm done being haunted by a house, I said. 2 weeks later, with Henry's help, I sold it. The buyers were a young couple, polite, kind-eyed, holding hands like we once did. They didn't know the history, and I didn't tell them. Some stories are meant to be buried with the walls that kept them. When the deal closed, I wired half the proceeds into a new account, one dedicated to funding legal aid for women over 60 who'd faced financial exploitation. I called it the Hale Foundation. Evelyn grinned when I told her. A poetic ending. I shook my head. Not an ending, a beginning. The same day the sale finalized, a letter arrived. David's handwriting. Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I filed for divorce. Laura's gone. She took the car, the savings, whatever was left. Maybe it's what I deserve. I'm starting over, smaller apartment, different job, no lies this time. If you ever let me back in your life, I'll earn it one day at a time. Love, David. I sat for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. Evelyn read my face. Will you write back? Not yet, I said softly. Sometimes silence teaches louder than words. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and rose. Freedom, I realized, didn't mean closing every door. It meant choosing which ones you left open. And this one, maybe, someday could open again. A month passed before I heard from David again. This time, it wasn't a text or a letter. It was a knock on Evelyn's door. It was Sunday morning, and the smell of pancakes filled the house. Evelyn was humming to herself when the sound came, 3 soft knocks, the kind that didn't belong to a stranger. She turned to me, brows raised. You expecting anyone? I shook my head, heart tightening. No. When I opened the door, he was standing there, thinner, pale, a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. His suit hung loose on him, and there were faint purple shadows beneath his eyes. Hi, Mom, he said softly. The last time I'd seen him, he was standing in the rain, crying on the courthouse steps. That image had stayed with me not because of pity, but because it was the first time in years I'd seen him without pride. I didn't speak right away. I just studied him. He looked like someone who'd been stripped down to truth. David, I finally said, you look human again. He gave a small, broken laugh. Guess that's something. Evelyn, ever the guardian angel, appeared behind me. I'll be in the garden, she said quietly. You two talk. We sat at the table. I poured coffee for both of us. He kept his hands clasped, like a boy waiting to be scolded. I read about the foundation, he said after a moment. The Hale Fund. You're helping people. I'm proud of you. Thank you, I said, though the words felt strange between us. How's the new apartment? He smiled faintly. Small, quiet. I've been doing freelance design work. It's not much, but it's mine. His voice cracked on that last word, mine, as if he'd just begun to understand what ownership meant. We drank our coffee in silence for a while. Finally, he said, I sent you the first payment. He blinked. Payment? For the debt. The $70,000 I owe you. Henry sent me the paperwork. I signed it. I nodded slowly, my chest tightening. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. He looked me straight in the eye. You were right. I treated you like a bank, not a mother. I want to fix that even if it takes the rest of my life." His voice wavered, but the sincerity in it felt like sunlight through a cracked window, cautious but real. I didn't cry. Not this time. I'd already shed every tear I had. Instead, I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "Then start by being someone you wouldn't be ashamed to introduce to your father." He nodded, eyes glistening. That afternoon, he helped Evelyn in the garden, kneeling beside her as they trimmed the rose bushes. Watching them, I felt something uncoil in my chest, not forgiveness, not yet, but the space where forgiveness might grow. When he left, he hugged me tentative, like he was asking permission. I didn't pull away. "Thank you for seeing me," he murmured. "Thank you for finally looking," I replied. Days turned into weeks. The foundation grew faster than I'd imagined. Local newspapers ran small stories. Widow turns betrayal into legal support network. Donations trickled in. Henry handled the paperwork, and Evelyn, ever resourceful, turned her guest room into a small office. Each time a new woman came in, eyes tired and hands shaking, I saw a piece of myself in her. Women who had been drained by love, by children who forgot, by spouses who took and never gave. We helped them secure their homes, file claims, rewrite wills. And in each success, I felt a piece of my old self dissolve, replaced by something fiercer, purer. One afternoon, I was sorting case files when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "Mrs. Hale? This is Judge Barrett's clerk. The court wanted to inform you that your case file was referenced in a new financial abuse awareness initiative. They're creating educational materials based on your testimony." I sat very still. "You mean?" "Yes," she said warmly. "You've helped change the law's language for seniors reclaiming autonomy. You made a difference." For a moment, I couldn't speak. All I could do was press the phone to my chest and whisper, "Richard, you'd be proud." That night, as I stood on the porch watching the sunset bleed into the horizon, Evelyn joined me with 2 glasses of wine. "Who knew," she said, "that your story would change other people's lives?" I smiled faintly. Maybe that's what it was always meant to do. She tilted her glass toward me. "To justice, and to women who refuse to stay invisible." We clinked glasses. The sound was soft, but it carried like a promise sent into the twilight. A few months later, the rhythm of my days had changed completely. I woke before dawn, took my coffee to the porch, and watched the light climb over Evelyn's garden. Then I'd drive into town, unlock the foundation's small office, and start the day with stories, some heartbreaking, some triumphant, all familiar. Most mornings, a line of women would already be waiting outside. Some came clutching folders of unpaid loans and eviction notices. Others carried nothing but shame and trembling hands. They all began the same way. My daughter, my husband, my son, each name another echo of mine. I listened, wrote notes, and helped them find their strength in the paper trail, the law, the truth. Every victory, no matter how small, felt like a thread pulled from the tangle of my own past. In between appointments, I would glance at my phone. Always the same message from David. "Transfer complete. $3,000. Thank you for the chance, Mom." He never missed a month. Never added excuses or emojis, just quiet, steady repayment. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect written in numbers. One afternoon, I came home early and found Evelyn reading by the window. "There's a letter for you," she said, passing me an envelope. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, slanted. I opened it carefully. "Mrs. Hale? My name is Sarah Lowell. I was one of the women your foundation helped last month. I don't know if you remember me, the one whose son forged her signature for a bank loan. You sat with me for 2 hours and told me something I'll never forget. We cannot control how they love us, but we can control how we stop them from hurting us." I repeated that to myself every day since. Yesterday, I won my case. My house is mine again. Thank you for teaching me that self-respect isn't selfish. With gratitude, Sarah. By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. Evelyn looked up from her book. "Good letter? Better than a birthday," I said softly. That night, I dreamed of Richard. We were back in our old kitchen, him sitting at the table, sleeves rolled up, coffee steaming between his hands. "You did it," he said, smiling. "You found your voice." I woke up crying, not from sadness, but from a sense of completion. For the first time, his absence didn't ache. It felt like guidance fulfilled. 2 weeks later, Henry stopped by the foundation. He looked unusually pleased. "Margaret," he said, "do you have a minute?" "Always," I said, clearing a space on my desk. He placed a thin folder in front of me. "A pro bono case. I think you should take it." I raised an eyebrow. "You're volunteering me for work now?" He chuckled. "Just listen. It's a petition to form a regional advocacy board for elder financial rights. They want you to chair it." He blinked. "Me? You. The woman who stood up in court and changed the language of self-respect. It's poetic justice." I stared at the folder, stunned. "Henry, I never planned to lead anything. I just wanted peace." He smiled gently. "Peace isn't the absence of purpose, Margaret. It's when your purpose stops hurting." I nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time." That evening, as Evelyn and I prepared dinner, I told her about the offer. Her eyes lit up. "Chairwoman Hale, it suits you." "Oh, don't you start," I groaned. "I'm too old for titles." "Nonsense. You're not old, you're seasoned. Like cast iron, unbreakable once you've been through enough fire." We both laughed until tears came. But later, as I lay in bed, I thought about it again. A board, a movement, something that could outlive me. The thought didn't scare me. It thrilled me. The next morning, I accepted the position. And just like that, the woman who once wept over a forgotten birthday cake was now heading a cause that would help hundreds of others reclaim their lives. Funny how justice doesn't always arrive in gavel strikes or headlines. Sometimes it begins with a woman lighting candles for herself. The day I officially became chairwoman of the Elder Justice Board, I wore the navy dress Richard had always loved, simple, graceful, stitched from the same fabric I'd once saved for special occasions. I smiled when I realized this was one of them. The meeting was held in the city courthouse, the same one where I'd once stood trembling as Laura tried to declare me unfit. That irony wasn't lost on me. I walked through the double doors, head high, my heels echoing on the marble floor. Inside the chamber sat 12 people, lawyers, social workers, and community advocates. Some were half my age, others close to my own. They stood when I entered. For a moment, I wanted to tell them to sit. I was no hero, but something inside me whispered, "Own this." The clerk adjusted her glasses. "Mrs. Hale," she said, "thank you for agreeing to lead this initiative. We've all read about your case. It's changed things." I smiled. "It wasn't just a case," I said. "It was a lesson in remembering that age doesn't erase agency. We all forget our worth sometimes. The law shouldn't." There was a hush, the kind that doesn't demand applause because silence itself means respect. When the meeting ended, several members approached to shake my hand. A young paralegal, no older than 25, lingered after the others had gone. "My grandmother's going through something similar," she said softly. "You gave me the courage to talk to her about it." Her voice broke slightly. "Thank you." I nodded, speechless. She left, but the echo of her gratitude stayed. That's when I realized something profound. My story, the one that had started in silence and humiliation, had become a bridge. A few days later, as I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed with a text from David. "Can I come visit? Just me. No drama. Please." I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to say no to protect the quiet I'd worked so hard to build. But another part, the part still stitched from motherhood, whispered that perhaps healing needed witnesses. "Come Sunday," I typed. "Morning. Bring nothing but honesty." Sunday arrived bright and windless. I set 2 cups on the table, not out of habit this time, but intention. Evelyn had gone to church. She said she wanted us to have the space. At exactly 10, David's car pulled into the driveway. He stepped out slowly, holding a small box instead of flowers. "Mom," he said, standing at the doorway like a child again. "Come in," I replied, my voice calm. He sat across from me. For a few seconds, we just listened to the clock ticking between us. Then he slid the box across the table. "I made something for you." Inside was a bronze plaque, hand-engraved, "Margaret Hale, for reminding the world that dignity has no expiration date." I ran my fingers over the letters. "Did you do this yourself?" He nodded. "Took me weeks. I didn't know what to buy you that could even begin to matter." I swallowed hard. "You didn't have to buy me anything, David. You just had to show up." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe I'm finally learning." We spent hours talking not about money or apologies, but about life. He told me about his job, about volunteering at a youth center, about how it felt to start from nothing. I listened, sometimes laughing, sometimes quiet, letting the rhythm of conversation heal what silence had broken. As he stood to leave, he looked around the kitchen, the same one that had once witnessed my heartbreak. "It's different here," he said. "It's peaceful," I corrected. He nodded, then looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "Mom, are we okay?" I thought about that long and hard before answering. "We're getting there," I said. "Forgiveness isn't a moment, David. It's a journey, but you're walking in the right direction." He smiled, eyes shining. "Then I'll keep walking." When he left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt balanced, like a room finally cleared of ghosts. That night, I hung the plaque above my desk at the foundation. The bronze caught the lamplight, warm and soft. I whispered to the empty room, "Dignity has no expiration date." And for the first time in 74 years, I believed it completely. By autumn, the foundation had its own rhythm, a living organism that breathed through the people it helped. We had volunteers now, a proper office downtown, and even a modest plaque on the wall that read, "The Hale Foundation for Dignity and Justice." Every time I passed it, I smiled. The name wasn't vanity, it was reclamation. A woman who once had no voice now had one carved into metal. David kept coming by once or twice a month. Sometimes he'd help organize files. Sometimes he'd drive me to events. But what I cherished most was his silence, the quiet kind that said, "I'm here, even if I don't know how to make it right yet." One afternoon, as I prepared for a press interview, David poked his head into the office. "You look nervous," he teased gently. I smirked. It's not every day someone asks me how I turned heartbreak into a legal institution. He chuckled. "You'll be great, Mom." But then he hesitated. "Can I come with you?" That one question, "Can I come with you?" made my heart twist. For so many years it had always been, "Can I borrow? Can you help?" But never, "Can I stand beside you?" "Of course," I said. "It's about time the world sees who helped inspire this." The interview took place in a small local studio. The journalist, a kind-eyed woman named Dana, adjusted her microphone and smiled. "Mrs. Hale," she began, "your story has inspired thousands, but what would you say to people who feel it's too late to take their power back?" I thought for a long moment before answering. "I'd say time doesn't erase worth. It only hides it under years of guilt and fear. But the truth—" I paused, looking at David through the glass. "The truth is, reclaiming dignity isn't about revenge. It's about remembering that you were never small, even when others treated you that way." Dana smiled softly. "Beautifully said." When we left the studio, David didn't speak until we reached the car. "Mom," he said finally, voice thick. "I wish I'd heard that version of you when I was younger." "You weren't ready to listen," I said gently, "and I wasn't ready to speak." We both laughed, though our eyes shone. The following week, Henry called. "Margaret, I've got something you should hear." His voice had that low hum. It always did before something serious. "Don't worry, nothing bad," he added quickly. "Actually, it's poetic justice." He explained that Laura had filed for bankruptcy after her employer uncovered evidence of forged documents, including one related to my old accounts. The bank launched an internal review, and through Henry's previous filings, they discovered how much she'd exploited not just me, but others. "She's been barred from working in finance," Henry said. "It's over." I exhaled slowly. "I didn't need revenge, Henry, but justice that I can live with." He laughed softly. "Then let's call it closure." That evening, I sat in the garden behind the foundation, surrounded by the scent of lavender and autumn rain. I opened my notebook, the same one I'd once used to track debts and betrayals, but this time, I wrote something new. April 23rd, 2025. The day I stopped waiting to be loved and started loving myself. October 3rd, 2026, the day justice found its way back. The pages that had once chronicled loss now chronicled liberation. A week later, the board held its first fundraising gala. The room was full of women who had once come to me broken, now radiant in gowns and confidence. They brought friends, lawyers, and donors, each one a living testimony. As I took the podium, I scanned the crowd and spotted David near the back. He stood beside Evelyn and Henry, his hands clasped, pride written all over his face. Good evening, I began. My voice echoed steady and warm. When I started this foundation, I thought I was building a shelter for others, but I realize now I was rebuilding myself. Tonight, every story in this room proves that no betrayal can end you not if you remember who you were before it began. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was tender, like dozens of hearts beating in sync. When I stepped off the stage, David met me halfway. "You did it, Mom," he said, his eyes glistening. I smiled. "No, son, we did." Winter arrived early that year, but it carried a gentler chill than the winters before. Snow dusted the streets outside the foundation, frosting the branches like lace. I had learned to love this quiet season, the time when everything paused long enough for gratitude to echo. The board had grown to 30 members now. Our initiatives reached 5 counties, and every time a new case came in, I made sure each woman who walked through those doors was treated as I once wished to be, seen. One afternoon, as I locked up, Henry walked beside me. His face, lined but kind, glowed in the soft lamplight. "You realize," he said, "that next week marks 2 years since that birthday?" I stopped, surprised. 2 years? He nodded. "Seems longer, doesn't it?" It did. That night, the cake, the silence, the text that broke my heart felt like something that had happened to another woman entirely. A ghost of who I used to be. Henry smiled. "I was thinking we should commemorate it somehow." I laughed. "You want to throw me a birthday party, after all that?" "Not a party," he said. "A celebration of what came after." And so, on the morning of April 23rd, 2027, the Foundation's lobby filled with familiar faces: Evelyn, with her ever-present scarf, Henry holding a bouquet of sunflowers, David carrying a small cake of his own. When I walked in, they burst into applause. David grinned. "Mom, we figured after everything, you deserve candles that light up for you." Evelyn chimed in, "And we promise not to make you eat alone this time." The laughter that followed was the purest sound I'd heard in years. They dimmed the lights. I stood before the cake, not a dark chocolate cherry one this time, but vanilla lemon, my favorite as a child. The candles flickered, golden and soft. David leaned close. "Make a wish, Mom." I smiled. "I don't need to." Then I took a deep breath and blew out the candles. The room erupted in cheers, but what I felt wasn't celebration, it was peace. Deep, lasting peace. Later, as the party wound down, David approached me quietly. "I brought something," he said. He handed me a small velvet pouch. Inside was a delicate golden locket engraved with the words, "For every second chance we earn, not ask for." I opened it and saw 2 tiny photos inside. One of him as a child, the other taken last month, me on the porch with Evelyn, both of us laughing mid-sentence. He said, "I wanted you to know that I finally understand what it means to give without expecting and to ask without taking." Tears blurred my vision. "You've grown, David," he smiled faintly, "because you finally stopped saving me." That evening, after everyone left, I sat by the window holding the locket. Snow fell softly outside. The candles still flickered on the empty cake. I whispered to the woman I had once been, the one who waited for crumbs of affection, "You were enough all along. You just needed to remember." And in that whisper, I finally let her rest. In the years that followed, the foundation became something far greater than I had imagined, a national initiative supporting thousands of women. We opened branches in 3 other states. We published a guidebook called Invisible No More. I traveled often, sometimes with Evelyn, sometimes alone. I spoke at universities, at women's shelters, even at courtrooms. Every time, I began with the same sentence. Once upon a time, I baked myself a birthday cake and found freedom instead. Audiences would gasp, laugh, and then cry because they knew. They'd lived their own versions of that silence. Now, at 75, I still keep that locket close. Sometimes David visits with his daughter, yes, my granddaughter, Lily, who loves baking just like her great-great-grandmother once did. Last week, she asked me, "Grandma, will you teach me how to make your cake?" And I said, "Only if you promise to never bake it for anyone who doesn't show up for you." She giggled, not fully understanding. But one day, she will. Because the recipe isn't just for cake, it's for self-respect. If you're hearing this now, remember, it's never too late to reclaim your worth. Never too late to choose peace over pleasing and dignity over duty. And if you've ever blown out your candles alone, know that somewhere out there, another woman has done the same. And she rose from it, brighter than ever. Stop waiting for crumbs, bake your own feast.